Genesis chapter 5 lists a genealogy stretching from Adam all the way down to Noah. And because the Bible lists the ages of the different people in this genealogy and how long they lived, a lot of people have tried to calculate the age of the earth or the date of creation by simply adding up the ages of these different characters in that genealogy. But what about that? Is this an accurate way to calculate the age of the earth? Let's take a look at this. First of all, think about adding up the lifespans. Genesis chapter 11 gives a similar genealogy to the one we see in Genesis 5, except this one goes from Noah's son Shem all the way down to Abraham. Now, we can estimate around when Abraham lived based on places that are named in the Bible and cultural conditions that the Bible describes. And so people have estimated that Abraham lived around 2000 BC. And so because of this, Abraham's really the first person in the Bible that we can put in some kind of a historical context. And so because of this, people have assumed that you could simply calculate the beginning of the earth by adding up the numbers from Abraham backwards to Shem, then Noah, and backwards to Adam using these two genealogies. And based on that method, Sir Isaac Newton estimated that the world was created around 4000 BC. But that doesn't seem consistent with what we know about the dawn of human civilization from other sources. For example, human populations began to settle down in places like the Indus River Valley and in Mesopotamia around 7000 BC. So what do we make of this? To help understand this, I want you to understand the idea of telescoping the genealogies. The assumption behind dating creation to around 4000 BC is that there are no gaps or no missing names in the biblical chronologies. But unlike lineage records of today, the Bible genealogies commonly are telescoped, meaning that they leave names out. You see, the way the Bible approaches genealogies is it will often leave certain generations out in order to highlight landmark or significant people within that lineage. For example, in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew chapter 1, Matthew has organized it into three stylized groups. There are three groups of 14 generations, but in order to achieve that stylistic function, he has to leave out the names of at least three biblical kings that were in that lineage. We know they're left out because of the histories, the Old Testament histories. And so in Matthew 1 verse 8, it says that Jehoram was the father of Uzziah, when in fact, comparing the histories, we realize that Uzziah was the great-great-grandson of Jehoram. In that sense, father means ancestor. And so this is also common in genealogies in the Arab world, in Sudan, other places around the ancient Middle East. Now, some people argue that the genealogies in Genesis cannot be telescoped because they give the exact number of years before and after each person's death. But if you look at the genealogy in Genesis chapter 11, we find that there's a parallel genealogy in Luke chapter 3. It tells basically the same genealogy of that same span, but in Luke chapter 3, it adds a generation that's not present in Genesis 11. And so we know that at least one of the genealogies in Genesis could possibly have been telescoped. And so what do we make of this? How do we come to a conclusion? Many theologians hold that the genealogies in Genesis should be taken at face value and can be used to establish a dating system. But there are many conservative theologians who also hold that the genealogies in Genesis have been telescoped. And so it's at least reasonable to consider the possibility that the number of years from Adam to Noah and from Shem to Abraham is undetermined, and that the earth really could be much older than 6,000 years.